Hello, survivors. Do you want to be part of the next stories? Comment below your name and the situation you would like to be in. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin. I'm writing this because someone needs to know what happened at Tower Delta 4. Maybe it's pointless now, but if anyone's still monitoring frequencies, if there's still hope somewhere out there, you deserve the truth about October 15th. My name is Dean McVoy, and I was the senior tower technician for the Boise Regional Communications Array. 23 years climbing steel and fixing signals that keep this country connected. That morning started like any other. Coffee at 5 a.m., equipment check, weather report showing moderate storm activity moving through the valley. But it almost ended before it began. I was 180 feet up Tower Delta 4 when the safety cable snapped. The crack echoed across the mountainside like a gunshot. 1 second I was securing the primary antenna array. The next I was dangling by my climbing harness, watching a 60-pound cable assembly plummet toward the rocks below. My backup line held, but barely. I could feel the anchor points groaning under the sudden stress. Heart hammering against my ribs, I managed to clip into the tower framework and catch my breath. 23 years of climbing, and I'd never had equipment fail like that. The cable showed signs of stress corrosion, probably been weakening for months. Should have caught it during the last inspection. I radioed down to Pete Kowalski, my ground support. "Pete, cable failure on the primary array. I'm okay, but we've got a problem." Static answered me. I tried again. "Pete, you copy?" Nothing. That's when I noticed the radio display. No signal bars, no carrier wave. Complete communication blackout. I worked my way down carefully, using redundant safety lines. The October storm was building, wind gusts making the tower sway like a ship's mast. Rain started as a light drizzle but quickly turned into a steady downpour that made every handhold treacherous. The equipment shed sat in an eerie red glow from the emergency lighting. Bank after bank of communication equipment lined the walls. Military frequencies, civilian emergency services, commercial broadcasting. All showing the same thing. No signal. Pete was nowhere to be found. His truck was still parked outside, keys hanging from the ignition, driver's door hanging open like he'd left in a hurry. His coffee sat on the workbench, still warm. I grabbed the landline to call dispatch. Dead. Satellite uplink? Nothing. Cell tower repeater? Silent. For the first time in my career, I was completely cut off from the outside world. The only sound was rain hammering the shed's metal roof, and the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the mountains. But something else bothered me. Pete wouldn't just leave. Not without saying something, not with equipment running and a storm coming in. We'd worked together for 8 years. He was as reliable as atomic time. I found blood on the door frame. Not much, just a smear about shoulder height. Could have been anything, Pete cutting himself on the sharp edge. Maybe. But it was fresh, still tacky to the touch. Standard protocol said to run diagnostics, check power systems, isolate the problem. But something in my gut told me this wasn't equipment failure. I'd felt this kind of wrongness before, during my time in Afghanistan. That moment when everything goes quiet just before the world explodes. I fired up the backup generator and started cycling through frequencies manually. Static filled my headphones for endless minutes until finally, a voice broke through on the emergency band. Repeating emergency alert. Massive civil disturbance reported in major population centers. Seek immediate shelter. Avoid contact with aggressive individuals. The transmission cut to static. I adjusted the antenna array, managed to catch fragments from different stations. Hospitals overwhelmed. Patients attacking staff. Unknown pathogens spreading rapidly through byte transmission. Military units mobilizing. Declare martial law in affected areas. Do not approach infected personnel. Extreme aggression and resistance to pain. Infected personnel. The words hit me like cold water. I'd been monitoring emergency frequencies for years, heard everything from natural disasters to terrorist attacks. But this terminology was new, clinical, terrifying. I spent the next hour trying to piece together what was happening from scattered transmissions. Reports of violence in downtown Boise, Emergency services going dark one by one. Something about a virus that made people extremely aggressive, spreading through direct contact. Victims described as moving in ways that seemed wrong, ignoring injuries that should have incapacitated them. Then I heard something that changed everything. Tower Delta 4, this is Colonel Scoot Northcom. If you're receiving this transmission, maintain your position. Your facility is critical for coordinating evacuation efforts. Military support en route. Do not abandon your post. My hands shook as I keyed the microphone. Colonel, this is Dean McVoy, Senior Technician at Delta 4. I'm here alone. Most of my equipment is operational, but I've lost primary communications. My ground support is missing. McVoy, you need to restore full broadcast capability immediately. We're coordinating civilian movement through mountain passes. Without your relay station, we're flying blind. Estimate over 30,000 civilians fleeing affected areas. Sir, I can boost the signal, but I'll need to climb the tower again. Weather conditions are deteriorating, and I just had equipment failure. Whatever it takes, McVoy. Lives depend on that signal. Entire families are trapped on mountain roads with no communication. You're their lifeline. The weight of those words settled on my shoulders like lead. 30,000 people. Families with children, elderly folks who couldn't move fast, all of them depending on my voice to guide them to safety. Colonel, what happened to my ground support? Pete Kowalski? Unknown. We've lost contact with most civilian personnel in your area. Focus on the mission, McVoy. People are dying. The line went dead. I stared at the tower through the shed's small window. 200 feet of steel ladder disappearing into storm clouds. The broken cable hung like a dead snake from the antenna array. In normal conditions, it was a routine climb. But with wind gusts hitting 40 miles per hour, rain turning every surface slick, and equipment failure already claiming one safety line, it would be suicide. Except people were dying down there. Families trying to escape whatever hell had consumed the cities. And I was the only one who could give them a voice in the darkness. I suited up in my climbing gear, harness, helmet, insulated gloves. The ascent tools felt familiar in my hands, comforting despite the circumstances. How many times had I made this climb? Hundreds, thousands, but never with the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, never knowing that my ground support might be dead or worse. The tower swayed in the wind as I started climbing. Each step sent vibrations through the steel framework, rain stinging my face like needles. At 50 feet, I could see the valley spread out below, normally a peaceful vista of forests and farmland. Today, smoke columns rose from multiple points, too many to be accidental fires. At 100 feet, my radio crackled. McVoy, we're getting reports of large groups moving north from Boise. Estimate several thousand civilians on Highway 21. They need guidance on safe routes. I keyed my mic without stopping. Roger, almost at the primary array. Negative on Highway 21, another voice cut in. Roadblock established at mile marker 47, route compromised. Repeat, do not direct civilians to Highway 21. Compromised. Military speak for overrun. At 150 feet, I could see them. Dark shapes moving along the highway in the distance, but not in the organized columns you'd expect from an evacuation. These figures moved wrong, lurching, stumbling, but with frightening persistence. Even from this height, something about their movement patterns made my skin crawl. A convoy of civilian vehicles had stopped along the highway, people milling around their cars. I watched through the rain as several figures approached from the tree line. The civilians seemed to think they were other refugees at first, even waving them over. Then the screaming started. Even 2 miles away and 150 feet up, I could hear it. High-pitched, terrified, cutting through the storm like a blade. The figures fell on the civilians with savage intensity, and I watched in horror as the organized evacuation turned into chaos. People scattered in every direction, abandoning vehicles, children, everything. McVoy, report. Working on it. I stripped damaged cable, made new connections with shaking hands. Colonel, I'm seeing large groups of hostiles on Highway 21. They don't look normal. They just attacked a civilian convoy. Copy that. Those are infected civilians, extremely dangerous. Do not attempt contact. The virus affects brain function, removes pain response and normal behavioral inhibitions. Infected civilians. Zombies. The word lodged in my throat like a stone, but there was no other way to describe what I was watching. I reached the primary antenna array at 180 feet. The storm had torn loose several connections, and the broken safety cable had damaged the main transmission line. I worked quickly, muscle memory guiding my hands while my mind processed what I was seeing below. The highway was packed with abandoned vehicles. People ran between them, some carrying luggage, others just running. And pursuing them, those shambling figures moved with relentless focus, showing no regard for the storm or terrain. They climbed over cars, pushed through obstacles driven by something beyond normal human motivation. As I worked, fragments of radio chatter painted a horrific picture. The infection was spreading faster than containment efforts. Major cities were going dark. Military units were falling back to defensive positions. CDC facilities had been overrun. Government officials were evacuating to secure locations. And somehow I was supposed to keep broadcasting hope while the world collapsed below me. I restored the primary signal just as the storm reached its peak. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the valley in stark detail. What I saw made my blood freeze. The highway wasn't just crowded with refugees anymore. The infected had reached them in force. Bodies lay scattered across the asphalt, some moving weakly, others completely still. The infected showed no fear of injury, no regard for their own safety. They just kept coming, drawn by movement and sound. Signal restored, I reported, climbing down as fast as I dared. Broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Outstanding work, McVoy. Military convoy ETA 20 minutes to your position. Hold tight. 20 minutes felt like hours as I monitored the radio traffic. Reports flooded in from across the region. Fire Base Charlie requests immediate extraction. Perimeter overrun. Hospital evacuation incomplete. Medical staff overwhelmed. Infected inside the building. Roadblock at Junction 15 has fallen. Repeat. Junction 15 compromised. Estimate 200 hostiles moving north. I started broadcasting evacuation routes, coordinating with surviving military units to guide civilians towards safe zones. My voice became a lifeline for thousands of people fleeing the chaos, directing them away from overrun areas toward mountain passes that might still be clear. But with each passing hour, the safe zones grew smaller. The infected weren't just isolated incidents anymore. They were a spreading plague, consuming everything in their path. When the convoy finally arrived, I'd never been so relieved to see military vehicles. 3 Humvees and a supply truck, carrying 12 soldiers led by Lieutenant Dan Hu. They set up a perimeter around the tower facility with practiced efficiency. McVoy, Hu was young but carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd seen combat. Colonel Scoot sends his regards. Your broadcasts have saved a lot of lives today. How bad is it out there? And what happened to my ground support? Hu's expression darkened. Bad. Boise is lost. Most of southern Idaho is compromised. We're falling back to defensive positions in the mountains, using your tower to coordinate the retreat. He paused. As for your man, we found a truck matching your description about 2 miles down the access road. Signs of struggle. No body. Pete was gone. Maybe dead, maybe worse. I pushed down the grief and focused on the mission. What exactly are we dealing with? Hell if we know for certain. CDC thinks it's some kind of virus that attacks the brainstem. Victims become extremely aggressive, don't respond to pain. Only way to stop them is destroying the brain. He paused, and it spreads through bites. 1 scratch and you're done. Incubation is fast, sometimes minutes. The soldiers worked through the afternoon, reinforcing the facility with sandbags and razor wire. I stayed in the communications shed, maintaining contact with evacuation routes and military units. Every few minutes brought new reports of areas falling to the infected. As darkness approached, we started seeing movement in the tree line. Nothing obvious, just shadows shifting between the pines, the occasional snapping of twigs. But Hope's men noticed too. taking positions with their rifles ready. "McVoy, we need continuous broadcasts through the night," Ho told me. "There are still thousands of people out there trying to reach safe zones. Your voice might be the only thing keeping them alive." I nodded, settling in for what I knew would be the longest night of my life. Outside, the storm was finally passing, but a different kind of darkness was rising from the valley below. As I keyed the microphone for another broadcast, I could hear them in the distance, a low moaning that carried on the wind like a diseased choir. The infected were climbing into the mountains, following the refugees toward the last remaining safe zones, and we were directly in their path. "This is Tower Tech Delta 4, I broadcast into the static-filled night. "If you can hear me, you are not alone. Head north on Forestry Road 412. Avoid Highway 21. Stay off major highways. Repeat, this is Tower Tech Delta 4. But even as I spoke those words of hope, I could see shapes moving through the darkness below, climbing steadily toward our position. The moaning was getting louder, more numerous. The night was just beginning, and I had the terrible feeling that dawn might find us fighting for more than just the signal. It might find us fighting for our lives. The first attack came at 3:17 a.m. I was hunched over the radio console, coordinating with a group of survivors trapped in a school bus 30 miles north, when Specialist Rodriguez whispered urgently from his position at the perimeter. Movement. Multiple contacts approaching from the southeast. Through the communications shed's reinforced window, I could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. Sharp cracks of rifle fire punctured the mountain silence. The infected had found us. "How many?" Lieutenant House's voice came through the radio, calm despite the situation. "At least 20, sir. More coming through the trees." I kept broadcasting even as the gunfire intensified. "Convoy 7, this is Delta 4. Continue north on Forest Service Road 238. Do not deviate. Hostile activity reported on all southern approaches." The response crackled through static. "Delta 4, we have children and elderly. Can't move fast enough. They're gaining on us." My throat tightened. Convoy 7 was a group of 43 survivors, including 12 kids under 10. They'd been traveling for 18 hours, vehicles breaking down, fuel running low. Now they were 15 miles away with a horde of infected closing in. "Convoy 7, there's an old fire station at mile marker 15. Stone building defensible. Hold there until dawn." "Copy." "Delta 4, trying to reach the station." Outside, the battle was escalating. The infected showed no tactical awareness, just relentless forward movement driven by base instincts. They absorbed rifle rounds that should have dropped them, only stopping when bullets found their heads. But for every one that fell, 2 more emerged from the darkness. "Who, fall back to secondary positions," I heard through the tactical radio. "Too many to hold the outer perimeter." The defensive lines contracted. Ho's 12 soldiers had set up a layered defense around the tower facility, but the infected kept coming. Their moans filled the air, a haunting chorus that seemed to call more of them from the depths of the valley. I switched frequencies, trying to reach other military units. Any station, this is Tower Delta 4. Under attack by large hostile force. Request immediate support." Static answered me. Then a weak voice broke through. "Delta 4, this is Captain Williams' Echo Company. We're 20 clicks southeast, but we're combat ineffective. Lost half my unit at Cascade. These things, they don't stop. Whatever you do, don't let them breach your position." The line went dead. Dawn brought a temporary reprieve. The infected seemed to lose some of their drive with the morning light, becoming more scattered. Huff used the opportunity to assess our situation. We'd lost 2 soldiers, Private Blake and Sergeant Kelly. Blake had been overrun trying to reload. Kelly had tried to save him and got pulled into a cluster of infected. "We can't hold another night like that," Howe told me as we surveyed the carnage around the facility. Bodies lay scattered across the compound, most with massive head trauma. The smell of death was overwhelming. "We need extraction or reinforcement." "What's the word from command?" "Nothing good. Fort Boise is gone. Command structure's falling apart. We might be on our own." Despite the grim news, I kept broadcasting. Throughout the morning, I guided 3 more convoys to safety, coordinated medical evacuations for injured survivors, and maintained contact with isolated military units across the region. My voice had become a beacon of stability in a world gone mad. But the infected were gathering in larger numbers. By midday, they'd begun surrounding the facility in a loose perimeter. They wandered aimlessly through the trees, drawn by sounds and movement. Worse, their numbers were growing. The moaning that had started as distant whispers was becoming a constant rumble as more infected climbed the mountain, following the scent trails left by refugees. "They just keep coming," observed Corporal Martinez, our squad's designated marksman. "No matter how many we drop, more show up. It's like the whole valley's infected." The radio brought increasingly desperate calls throughout the afternoon. "Delta 4, this is evacuation site Baker. We're overrun. Estimate 300 hostiles. If anyone receives this transmission, do not approach Baker site." "Tower Delta 4, civilian convoy requesting guidance. We're lost in the mountains. Fuel critical. Infected pursuing. Please respond." "Any station, this is Air Force 17. Emergency landing attempted at Mountain Home. Base is compromised. Do not send rescue. Repeat, do not send rescue." Each call was another piece of the puzzle, another indication that the situation was beyond salvage. But I kept responding, kept broadcasting coordinates and safe routes, kept being the voice of hope even as my own hope died. Then came the transmissions that nearly broke me. At 3:45 p.m., a weak signal crackled through. "Delta 4, this is Rebecca Williams at Clearwater Elementary. We have 42 children trapped on the 2nd floor, ages 5 to 12. The infected have surrounded the building. They're trying to break down the doors. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need immediate help." My hands shook as I keyed the microphone. "Clearwater Elementary, this is Delta 4. What's your exact location?" "We're on Oak Street, about 2 miles east of downtown Clearwater. The children are terrified. Some are crying for their parents. I don't know how much longer the doors will hold." I checked my maps frantically. Clearwater was 60 miles away, surrounded by infected territory. No military units in the area. No rescue possible. "Rebecca, you need to get the children to the highest point in the building. Barricade the stairwells. Stay quiet." "We tried, but there are too many of them outside. They keep throwing themselves against the walls. The building is shaking. Dean, please. These are just babies." The desperation in her voice cut through me like a blade. I could hear children crying in the background, their innocent voices calling for help that would never come. "Rebecca, there are no units available in your area. You need to hold your position." "How long? How long before someone can reach us?" I stared at the tactical map, knowing the truth but unable to say it. Just keep them calm. Keep them quiet. Help is coming." The lie burned in my throat. Help wasn't coming. Not for them. "Delta 4, they're inside the building now. I can hear them on the 1st floor. The children. Oh God, what do I tell them? Tell them to be brave. Tell them they're not alone." 20 minutes later, the screaming started. High-pitched, terrified voices that cut through the static like knives. Rebecca's voice returned one final time. "Delta 4, tell their families. Tell them we tried to protect them." The transmission ended in static and silence. 10 minutes after that, another call. "Delta 4, this is Highway Patrol Officer Janet Morrison. I'm trapped in my cruiser on Highway 84, mile marker 23, surrounded by approximately 50 infected. My partner's been bitten. He's turning. Request immediate backup." "Officer Morrison, are there any safe buildings in your area? Anywhere you can reach on foot?" "Negative. Open highway. They're climbing on the car now, breaking the windows. I can see their faces." "Oh Jesus, they used to be people. Some are still wearing name tags from the mall." I could hear glass breaking through the radio, the officer's breathing becoming rapid and panicked. "Morrison, do you have ammunition?" "Half a magazine, maybe 6 rounds. Not enough for all of them." "Save the last one," I said quietly, the words feeling like poison. "I understand. Delta 4, I have a daughter in Portland. Emma Morrison, age 8. If anyone's monitoring, tell her. Tell her mommy loves her." The radio went silent except for the sound of breaking glass and inhuman moans. At 4:15 p.m., the most heartbreaking call came through. Delta 4, this is Michael Chen. I'm in the basement of my house with my wife and 2 kids. Sarah's been bitten. She's getting sick. The kids don't understand what's happening. Michael, you need to isolate her immediately. Lock her in a separate room. I can't. She's my wife. We've been married 12 years. She's asking me to hold her hand while she dies. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Michael, where are your children? Playing in the corner. They think mommy just has the flu. They're so young. Tommy's only 4, Katie's 6. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them you love them. Keep them away from their mother. Delta 4, she's getting worse. Her skin is gray. She's making sounds. Not human sounds. But her eyes. Sometimes her eyes are still her. She's still in there, fighting it. The transmission continued for another 10 minutes. I listened helplessly as Michael described his wife's deterioration, his children's growing fear, his own desperate attempts to maintain normalcy in the face of horror. The last thing I heard was Michael's broken voice. Delta 4, she's gone. My Sarah's gone. And the kids. They're asking why mommy won't wake up. Each call was another piece of the puzzle, another indication that the situation was beyond salvage. But I kept responding, kept broadcasting coordinates and safe routes, kept being the voice of hope even as my own hope died. Around 4 p.m., we made a horrifying discovery. Private Gomez was on patrol along the eastern perimeter when he found them, scattered body parts and equipment from what looked like a refugee convoy. Families had made camp here sometime in the last day or two, thinking they were safe in the remote mountain location. Sir, Gomez reported to Howe, looks like they tried to hide here. Maybe 30 people. Men, women, children. I followed Howe to the scene. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. Children's toys, family photos, suitcases torn open and contents strewn across the ground. Blood stained the rocks and pine needles. Some of the bodies showed signs of feeding. How long ago? I asked. Hard to say. Maybe 12 hours. The infected don't leave much behind. What chilled me most was realizing these people had probably heard my broadcasts. I'd been guiding refugees through these mountains, telling them the high country was safer, and some of them had died because they trusted my voice. We need to get word out, I said. Warn people that nowhere is completely safe. That evening, Colonel Scoot made contact one final time. McVoy, this is Colonel Scoot. I'm authorizing Protocol 7. My blood went cold. Protocol 7 was the abandonment of civilian evacuation efforts in favor of military preservation. It meant the government was giving up on the civilian population. Sir, I still have contact with multiple survivor groups. There are hundreds of people out there depending on these transmissions. McVoy, the situation is untenable. We're establishing a fallback position at the Montana border. All available units are ordered to withdraw immediately. What about the civilians? They're on their own, as are you. I'm sorry. Son, your service has been exemplary, but we can't spare resources for extraction. Hold as long as you can, then destroy the facility and get out. The radio went silent. Colonel Scoot's words echoed in my head. Destroy the facility. Stop broadcasting. Abandon the thousands of people who depended on my voice for survival. I looked at Lieutenant Howe, who'd been listening to the transmission. His face was grim but unsurprised. Orders, sir? I asked. My orders are to protect this facility and support your mission. Those orders haven't changed. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Look outside. I peered through the window and felt my heart sink. The mountainside was covered with moving figures. Hundreds of infected had gathered during our conversation with command, forming a massive semicircle around our position. They wandered aimlessly, bumping into trees and each other, but their presence created an impenetrable barrier. They're drawn to the generator noise, Ho observed. And the radio transmissions. Every time you broadcast, more of them start climbing toward us. As if responding to his words, A low moan rose from the crowd of infected. It was answered by others, creating a sound like the world's largest funeral dirge. The infected began shuffling forward, drawn by the sounds from our facility. "All positions prepare for assault," Ho commanded. "Make every shot count." The second battle began at sunset. This time, the infected came from all directions simultaneously, a gray tide of stumbling figures that flowed over our outer defenses. They showed no fear of the gunfire, no self-preservation instinct. They just kept coming, drawn by an irresistible urge to reach the living. I stayed at the radio, coordinating with the remaining survivors even as the facility shook under assault. "Convoy 12, this is Delta 4. Change course to bearing 270. Heavy hostile activity in your area." "Delta 4. We can hear gunfire from your position. Are you under attack?" "Affirmative, Convoy 12. Continue your mission. Do not deviate." The infected breached our second perimeter at 9:30 p.m. I could hear them inside the compound now, their moans mixing with the crack of gunfire and the shouts of our defenders. Bodies fell, but more kept coming. Always more. Host's voice came through the tactical radio. "McVoy, they're through the inner fence. We're down to half strength. How much longer do you need?" "There are still people out there, still survivors who need guidance. We can't hold much longer." I kept broadcasting, even as the sounds of battle grew closer. Bodies crashed against the communication shed's reinforced door. The metal groaned under the assault, but held. "Convoy 15, this is Delta 4. Redirect to Cache Creek Road. Repeat, Cache Creek Road." "Delta 4, your signal is weak. Are you damaged?" My signal was weak because infected bodies were piling against the antenna feed lines outside. But I couldn't tell the survivors that. "Signal strength is adequate, Convoy 15. Continue to Cache Creek Road." At 10:45 p.m., I heard screaming from the compound. Not the inhuman moans of the infected, but human voices crying out in pain and terror. My men were dying out there, and I was powerless to help them. "Hoof, what's your status?" "We're in the equipment bunker, down to 4 men. They got Rodriguez and Martinez. McVoy, you need to get ready to abandon this position." "Negative. Still have survivors depending on broadcasts." "Dean, they're going to overrun us. You have to think about getting out." At 11:15 p.m., Hoof's final transmission came through. "McVoy, this is it. They're through the bunker door. Get out now while you still can. And Dean, it's been an honor." The radio went silent. Through the window, I could see infected pouring through the compound. They moved in shambling waves, following the scent of blood and drawn by the electrical hum of the equipment. Bodies of fallen soldiers lay scattered across the ground, some moving weakly as they began their own transformation. At 11:45 p.m., the door finally gave way. I spun around to see 3 infected stumbling into the shed. Their clothes were torn, faces streaked with blood and dirt. One wore the remains of a military uniform. Private Blake? I realized with horror. His clouded eyes showed no recognition, no trace of the young soldier who died protecting this place. I grabbed the fire axe from the emergency kit and brought it down on Blake's skull. The blade bit deep, dropping him instantly. The second infected lunged at me, and I barely managed to get the axe handle up to block its snapping teeth. Its breath was rank with decay, and I could see bite marks covering its arms and neck. The third infected circled behind me while I struggled with the second. I heard its footsteps and spun, catching it across the temple with the axe blade. Both bodies hit the floor, but I could hear more coming through the breached door. I barricaded myself in the rear equipment room and tried to re-establish communication. The main console was damaged by the fighting outside, but I managed to patch into the emergency backup system. My signal strength was minimal, but it was enough. "This is Tower Tech Delta 4, I broadcast into the static. "If you can hear me, you are not alone." Through the thin walls, I could hear the infected tearing apart the communications equipment. Sparks flew as they knocked over transmitters and antenna feeds. My signal was failing, but I kept broadcasting. "Head north. Avoid Highway 21. Stay off major highways." The backup power died at 2:30 a.m. I switched to battery power, knowing it would only last a few hours. The infected had moved on, probably drawn by sounds from other parts of the facility. The constant moaning continued outside, a reminder that the mountain was now theirs. Using a manual antenna selector, I managed to route power to the tower's primary array. My signal strength jumped, but I knew it wouldn't last long. Too many systems had been damaged. Any station. This is Tower Tech Delta 4, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. If you receive this transmission, relay the following information to any survivors. Northern mountain passes remain clear for now. Avoid populated areas. The infected are drawn to sound and movement. Head for higher elevations, but stay alert. No place is completely safe. I kept broadcasting as the battery power dwindled. Every few minutes I'd receive a weak response from survivors somewhere in the mountains. A family trapped in a cabin, a group of hikers trying to reach the Canadian border, a school teacher leading 30 children through the wilderness. Each response reminded me why I was still here, still fighting to keep the signal alive. Dawn brought an eerie silence. No gunfire, no human voices, just the constant low moaning of the infected as they wandered through the facility. The battle was over, and we'd lost. I climbed the internal ladder to check the tower's status. Most of the equipment was destroyed, but the primary antenna was still functional. I could broadcast, but only on limited power. From the equipment room's small window, I could see the extent of the disaster. The compound was overrun with infected. They moved aimlessly through the ruins, occasionally clustering around areas where they detected movement or sound. Of Lieutenant Howe and his soldiers, there was no sign except for the fresh infected wearing torn military uniforms. I spent the day conducting final equipment checks and preparing for what I knew would be my last transmission. The tower's base was surrounded by infected, but they seemed to lose interest in anything above ground level. If I could reach the antenna array, I might be able to boost the signal one final time, but it would be a one-way trip. As evening approached, I gathered my remaining batteries and the emergency radio kit. The infected below had spread out during the day, following scent trails and sounds through the forest, but hundreds still wandered the compound, drawn by the electrical hum from the tower. I recorded a final message explaining what had happened at Tower Delta 4, then began my ascent through the tower's internal maintenance system. The climb was harder than ever before. Days without proper food or sleep had weakened me, and the weight of the radio equipment made every step a struggle. But I kept climbing, driven by the knowledge that somewhere out there, people were still listening. At 100 feet, I could see the full scope of the disaster. The entire valley was filled with infected. They moved in rivers along the highways, following the paths taken by the refugees. The infection had consumed everything in its path, turning thriving communities into graveyards. At 150 feet, I caught sight of movement in the distance. A small convoy was making its way along a ridgeline, trying to stay ahead of a pursuing group of infected. They were too far away to help, but close enough to receive my transmission if I could boost the signal. I reached the primary antenna at 200 feet as the sun touched the horizon. The equipment was damaged but functional. I began making connections, rerouting power through the backup systems. "This is Tower Tech Delta 4, I broadcast into the dying light, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. If you can hear me, you are not alone." Below me, the infected had noticed my movement. They began gathering at the base of the tower, their upturned faces pale in the growing darkness. More arrived every minute, drawn by the sound of my voice and the flickering of my equipment lights. The convoy on the ridgeline responded, "Delta 4, this is Convoy Romeo. We can hear you clearly. Thank you for maintaining the signal." "Convoy Romeo, continue northwest along the ridge. Do not descend into the valley. Estimate several thousand hostiles in your area." "Copy. Delta 4, what's your status? You sound like you're broadcasting from altitude." I looked down at the sea of infected faces below me. They were pressed against the tower's base now, climbing over each other in their eagerness to reach me. The tower swayed slightly under their combined weight. "Convoy Romeo, my status is elevated. Continue your mission. Get those people to safety." "Delta 4, we're going to miss your voice out here. You've saved a lot of lives." As the last light faded from the sky, I continued broadcasting to anyone who could hear. The infected below had formed a living carpet around the tower, their moans creating a symphony of hunger and decay. The tower shook constantly now as they pressed against its supports, but my signal was strong, stronger than it had been in days. "This is Tower Tech Delta 4, I spoke into the microphone, my voice carrying across hundreds of miles of wilderness. "If you can hear me, you are not alone. Head north. Avoid populated areas. Stay together. Help each other. The world has changed, but hope survives." Throughout the night, I maintained contact with scattered groups of survivors. I guided a family of 5 around a massive horde near Twin Falls. I coordinated with a military unit trying to extract civilians from a surrounded town. I gave navigation assistance to a convoy of school buses carrying nearly 200 children. Each transmission reminded me why I was here, perched 200 feet above an ocean of hungry dead. As dawn approached, my batteries began to fail. The radio's display dimmed and my transmission range shrank. But I kept broadcasting, using every last watt of power to reach anyone still listening. "This is Tower Tech Delta 4, I whispered into the microphone as the sun rose over the infected masses below. Final transmission. If you can hear me, remember this. Humanity endures. Keep moving north, keep helping each other. Don't give up hope." The radio died with a soft click. My batteries were exhausted, my equipment silent. But somewhere beyond the infected masses, beyond the fallen cities and abandoned highways, people were still alive, still moving, still hoping. I leaned back against the antenna array, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. The tower swayed gently in the morning breeze, 200 feet above a sea of reaching hands and hungry faces. The infected would never reach me here. They'd wander the base of the tower until they found something else to pursue, then disperse back into the wilderness. I had food for maybe 3 days, water for 2. But I'd done what I came here to do. I'd kept the signal alive as long as humanly possible. I'd guided thousands of people to safety, given them hope when the world seemed hopeless. The morning was quiet except for the distant moaning of the infected. Somewhere out there, Convoy Romeo was making its way north. The school teacher was leading her 30 children to safety. The family of 5 was finding their way around the horde. Because I'd been here. Because I'd kept broadcasting. The signal was dead, but hope lived on. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.